What would a strong domestic U.S. energy production look like if you, let's say you were in Congress? What would you want that to look like? How would you map that out?
Well, I mean, I think we're kind of piecemealing a lot of the stuff. I don't feel, with all due respect to this administration or the last one as well for that too, is that no one sat down and said, "Okay, listen, this is how much energy and power our country needs." And right now, we get it from these buckets. Right now, we're getting about 22% of it from renewable. I'm pro renewable. I'm pro all of the above. We need an additional. It's not just an energy transformation; it's an energy addition. I think whale blubber was the last time we stopped using an energy source. And so Colorado produces some of the best solar and wind and hydro in the country, but we also produce some of the best natural gas as well. And why are we making it harder and harder to shut down? Why are we making it harder and harder to produce domestic natural gas as well as solar and wind when we're asking for that exact same type of energy production or power production that's coming out of these countries that aren't exactly our friends, let alone this whole transmission issue. Obviously, we need to figure out how to, because where the solar and wind and the natural gas is produced is not always where it gets consumed. And my understanding is our country needs about 200,000 more miles of transmission lines to move even the solar and wind electricity around. And I believe our country is producing 1,800 miles a year. So literally, in 103 years, we will have the amount of transmission lines we need to produce the current energy and power productions that we need. And so we are in dire needs of trying to figure out how to come up with a regulatory environment of making sure that permanent reform is not just a buzzword, but actually gets implemented. And we don't have a national grid and a national process, and that is good in many reasons. But we need to figure out how to work with our municipalities, work with our counties, work with our states, work with these regional power lines to figure out how do we put in a grid system that can actually move around the energy that we're going to need. Because if we're not, we're going to continue to be begging some really unpleasant countries for help. And I don't think there's any reason to be doing that when we are a great producer in a very clean way for our global climate, as opposed to just thinking that if it doesn't get done in our neighborhood, it's not going to be bad. And the same conversation goes for, I joke all the time that electrical car batteries are not made out of chocolate chips and dandelions. They're made out of minerals that we need to figure out how to access. And right now we're getting them from some very, very troubling countries. And so I really need to think that our country needs to have a real mathematical conversation. And it's third grade math. It's not calculus math about how much energy and power we use, where are we currently getting it from, where do we want to get it from, and let's make up a plan to figure out how to not only get it, but also move it around to make sure that we have a stable grid that's reliable and cost effective and continue to produce. We have a climate crisis, but we also have a math crisis about a lot of people, especially on the Democratic Party side, who don't always understand the math of our domestic energy needs. And that's really what I'm spending time talking about.
How do you streamline this conversation and bring both sides to the table?
You know, the third grade math says if we don't do all of the above, we're not going to be able to do anything close to it. And so, as much as these goals of 2030 and 2050, they're just mathematically unsound. And I don't mean to be disrespectful or childish about it, but when you do the math of supply and demand, there's a gap, and we need to figure out how to do that gap. But again, if the only people participating in the conversation are those that are on Twitter and on the cable news networks a lot from either side, those are people that I really don't want to spend the time sitting around the table. I can tell you how it happens in western and southern Colorado. Water is obviously a very big issue, and it's not that people are anti-water. It's just how are you going to work together. So when we start to talk about the issues that we have with weather disruptions and the climate crisis, it's let's get together and talk about water. We have conversations about water. They realize there's no blue horns, there's no red horns. There's just people sitting around trying to figure out how to do it. Another conversation we get into is with the soil health. And if farmers and ranchers don't have good soil health, it's really hard to be a productive rancher or farmer. They know that they're hunting at different times. We're planting at different times. And so there's conversations that when it comes to the core issue as opposed to labels, everyone's sitting around the table saying, yes, that is an issue that we're all facing. And people, again, they're not showing up with red hats or purple hats or blue hats. It's just like, hey, we're ranchers and farmers. How do we fix this to make sure that we can do the livelihood, to make sure we can feed our country and feed the nation? So, again, I think there are a lot of bipartisan people in Congress. They're just stuck in the subcommittee and committee meetings. And that's where I'm continuing to be excited about the Problem Solvers Caucus and some of those other caucuses that are working on the GSD, which is the Get Stuff Done. And I think that's where the Problem Solvers Caucus is. And there's some other caucuses that are trying to work together. And I'm telling you, I'm not naive. I meet a lot of good people that really, really want this to happen. And again, I think that's why we've been able to resonate really well with a wide variety of if you are not a pragmatic farmer or rancher, you are not a successful farmer or rancher. And we have a very unpragmatic person in Congress right now, no matter what you might think of her. And so just this boring, pragmatic, get stuff done, hit singles and doubles, let's really talk about the issue and not really worried about the concerns. And yeah, I would say that we would be a better country if there were more people that were elected to office that were willing to speak truth to their constituents. And you don't see a lot of people speaking truth to constituents, and we need to own kind of the truth of where we are. And that goes back to energy, that goes back to climate, that goes back to the immigration policy that we need to, there's some really troubling things that we really need to see fixed that I do believe 80% of the citizens of our country are fully behind, and they really don't care about red and blue. They just want to focus on results.
Adam Frisch, I appreciate you coming on, breaking down the issues with me. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Enjoy the rest of the summer.